June 4, 2010, Portland, Oregon. It was the morning of June 4, 2010, at Skyline Elementary in Portland, Oregon. 7-year-old Kyron Horman attended his school's science fair. He smiled for a photo, the last confirmed image of him. Hours later, his stepmother reported him missing. Despite massive searches, no clues were ever found. No witnesses, no evidence. To this day, Kyron's disappearance remains one of Oregon's deepest mysteries. It was June 4th, 2010, a Friday like any other in the life of the Horman family in Portland, Oregon. 7-year-old Kyron Horman was wearing his bright red CSI t-shirt, smiling with excitement. That morning, Skyline Elementary School was holding its traditional science fair, where students showcased their school projects. Kyron was particularly enthusiastic about his exhibit on the red-eyed tree frog. His stepmother, Terry Horman, accompanied him to the event, took photos, and dropped him off inside the school. After visiting the exhibits, Terry claimed she last saw Kyron walking toward his classroom around 8:45 a.m. She then left the school and went about her usual routine. What no one knew was that, just minutes later, Kyron would simply vanish inside the school building. No teachers, staff, or students reported seeing him in class that day. It wasn't until noon that his absence was first noticed. When Kyron didn't show up at the bus stop after school, the family was immediately contacted. Desperate, the parents called the police, and a search began quickly. The disappearance of a child inside a school triggered instant panic among authorities and the community. How could a young boy go missing in broad daylight, inside a secured and monitored environment? The mystery was only beginning. The initial search efforts were swift and intense. Police combed every inch of Skyline Elementary, including lockers, bathrooms, ventilation shafts, and outdoor areas. Search dogs were brought in to track Kyron's scent, but the trail ended abruptly near the school's exit. There were no signs of struggle, no witnesses, no visible clues. It was as if Kyron had vanished into thin air. The city of Portland quickly descended into an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty. Parents across the region were terrified by the thought of a possible abductor targeting schools. As the crucial early hours slipped away, Kyron's case turned into a desperate race against time. The community, stunned, anxiously waited for answers. But from the very start, the silence surrounding the case was haunting. In the 48 hours that followed, authorities launched one of the largest search efforts in the history of the state of Oregon. Hundreds of police officers, firefighters, and volunteers began a thorough sweep covering an 8-kilometer radius around the school. Helicopters scanned the nearby forested areas, while boats searched streams and reservoirs. Numerous back roads were blocked off and carefully inspected. The mission was clear: to locate any sign of Kyron as quickly as possible. Media coverage was immediate and intense. Major U.S. television networks provided real-time updates on the disappearance of the little boy with glasses, an angelic face, and a shy smile. Posters featuring Kyron's photo were distributed across the state and quickly reached national attention. The public response was remarkable, with thousands of people offering assistance in the search. The family's pain touched the hearts of the entire country. However, as days passed, the lack of solid leads made the case increasingly agonizing. There were no useful security cameras at the school, and no witnesses who saw Kyron leaving the building. No Amber Alert was initially issued, as there was no concrete evidence of an abduction at first. This delay would later spark criticism and lead to revisions in child abduction response protocols. Frustration grew among both the community and investigators. The forest searches continued for weeks. Teams scoured dense woods, wells, lakes, and private properties surrounding the school. But nothing was found. No clothing, objects, footprints, or physical traces. The absolute nature of the disappearance baffled even the most experienced investigators. They were facing a case that defied every investigative logic. As time passed without answers, authorities began turning their attention inward to Kyron's own inner circle. With no external leads, the natural focus of the investigation shifted closer to home. And it would be within the family itself that the first major twist would emerge. The already dramatic case was now entering far more disturbing territory. Suspicion would soon fall on someone very close. As the weeks passed and no external leads emerged, investigators began to shift their attention to Kyron's own household. Authorities started conducting extensive interviews with family members, focusing particularly on Kyron's stepmother, Terry Horman. She was the last known person to have seen Kyron at school that fateful morning. Inconsistencies in her statements began to raise suspicions. From that point on, the investigation took a new direction. Terry claimed she had dropped Kyron off at school at 8:45 a.m. and then followed her usual routine. However, as investigators reviewed her movements that morning, they identified gaps in time where her whereabouts were vague or unverified. Additionally, phone records showed calls and messages during hours considered suspicious. Authorities began to suspect that Terry wasn't being fully transparent about her activities. The net was slowly tightening around her. Close sources to the family also began reporting strange behavior from Terry in the days following the disappearance. Friends stated that shortly after Kyron vanished, she appeared cold and emotionally detached. Others reported previous arguments between Terry and Kyron Horman, Kyron's father, involving marital issues. There were even allegations that Terry had expressed frustrations about her role as a stepmother. Taken together, these factors increasingly fueled suspicion. Under mounting public pressure, police placed Terry under intense surveillance. Lengthy interrogations were conducted, searches were carried out at her home, and her car was thoroughly examined. Yet, despite all efforts, no physical evidence directly connecting Terry to Kyron's disappearance was ever found. The investigation remained stuck in the same frustrating place. Heavy suspicion, but no hard proof. The absence of evidence made the case even more agonizing. Meanwhile, the family dynamic began to collapse. Kyron Horman, convinced that Terry knew more than she was admitting, filed for divorce and obtained a restraining order. The family home turned into a public battleground, with accusations flying back and forth in full view of the media. The Kyron Horman case was no longer just about the disappearance of a little boy. It had become a full-blown family drama broadcast across the nation, and the truth remained buried in silence. In July 2010, a shocking new twist exploded across national headlines. According to authorities, Terry Horman had allegedly attempted to hire a landscaper to murder her husband, Kyron, months before Kyron's disappearance. The alleged contractor, known only as Rodriguez, reported Terry's offer to the authorities. This supposed murder plot further deepened the growing suspicions against her. The revelation caused a nationwide uproar. With this new development, Kyron was immediately placed under police protection. He publicly stated that he had been unaware of the threats until that point. The case, which already involved a missing child, now took on additional layers of conspiracy and attempted murder. However, even with these serious allegations, Terry was never formally charged with any criminal offense. Authorities continued to face the same obstacle: the absence of physical evidence. The alleged murder-for-hire attempt was used by prosecutors as a psychological pressure tactic. They hoped Terry might confess or reveal information about Kyron's whereabouts in exchange for legal deals. But Terry remained completely silent, never admitting any involvement in Kyron's disappearance. Her refusal to cooperate only fueled public suspicion and intensified public outrage. Legally, though, the case remained at a standstill. Terry's defense attorneys consistently denied her involvement in either case. They argued that the landscaper's allegations were inconsistent and that police lacked concrete evidence against her. Without physical proof, direct witnesses, or confessions, the criminal process stalled. Prosecutors grew increasingly frustrated with each passing day. Meanwhile, Kyron's whereabouts remained a complete mystery. This episode brought even more media pressure onto the case. Talk shows, news programs, and documentaries began dissecting every detail of Terry Horman's life. Her public image was virtually destroyed, even without any formal conviction. With each passing day, the Kyron Horman case was becoming more of a psychological drama than a traditional criminal investigation, and the little boy remained missing. In the years that followed, Portland police kept the case open but made fewer and fewer practical advances. New searches were conducted in forested areas and rural properties far from the school, always based on anonymous tips or new leads. But no excavation, aerial sweep, or renewed forensic analysis ever produced any concrete clues about Kyron's fate. It was a case of complete physical disappearance. No trace, no objects, no remains. The level of total vanishing remained almost unbelievable. The community's frustration grew with each anniversary of the disappearance. Every year, vigils were held with balloons and prayers in Kyron's memory. Posters with his face remained displayed on billboards, street signs, and community centers. Kyron's face became a permanent symbol of unending pain. With each passing year without answers, Portland's collective trauma only deepened. The media kept the case alive with periodic reports, investigative specials, and exclusive interviews with family members. Fred and Desiree, Kyron's biological parents, continued their public crusade for answers. They openly criticized Terry's actions and pushed authorities for a more aggressive investigation. Family tensions blended with the heartbreak of their missing child. The family's public pain touched millions of Americans. The Kyron Horman case became one of the most discussed child disappearances of the 21st century in the United States. It became the subject of books, podcasts, and documentaries, including episodes of 2020, Dateline, and Dr. Phil. The American public followed every minor update with anxiety and renewed hope. But despite the national outcry, concrete answers remained elusive. As time passed, the case grew darker and more haunting. Authorities, even under pressure, publicly admitted that they were facing one of the most complex cases of their careers. With no new leads or confessions, the investigation remained technically open but operationally stalled. With each new year came the question, will the truth about Kyron ever come to light? The silence surrounding the case had become as disturbing as the disappearance itself. The absolute void was the greatest mystery of all. As the years passed, the pain of absence became a chronic wound for the Horman family. Fred and Desiree, Kyron's biological parents, battled daily with the brutal uncertainty of not knowing their son's fate. Every birthday, every holiday, marked yet another occasion filled with absence and emptiness. Kyron's room remained untouched, a silent sanctuary of hope. Hope was the only thread they had left. Ganey Horman, Kyron's father, who had custody at the time of the disappearance, remained active in child abduction awareness campaigns. He became a strong advocate for legal reforms aimed at accelerating missing child investigations. But he also carried the public weight of having been married to Terry Horman, the primary suspect who was never indicted. His personal struggle became intertwined with the collective trauma of thousands of parents in similar situations. Kyron's case had become his life mission. Even as time passed, the media kept the case alive. Documentaries and podcasts revisited every detail of the investigation, keeping Kyron's story constantly present in the minds of the American public. Programs like Dateline NBC, Dr. Phil, and Crime Watch Daily explored the mystery from multiple angles. The question that echoed over and over remained the same. How does a child disappear inside a school and no one sees anything? This was the core of the public's enduring fascination with the case. The search efforts never fully stopped. Periodically, new searches were authorized in remote areas, rivers, and suspicious properties. Drones, new sonar technology, and specialized cadaver dogs were deployed with renewed hope. But year after year, the searches always ended the same way, without answers. It was as if Kyron had been swallowed by silence itself. The emotional weight of the case also reflected in American public opinion. Kyron came to represent not just a missing boy, but a symbol of the system's helplessness in the face of certain crimes. The inability to solve the case, despite so many resources, became a painful example of human fallibility in the face of absolute mystery. Kyron Horman was no longer just a name. He had become a national reminder of the pain of unexplained absence, and the public kept watching. As the years passed and no new evidence emerged, the case became fertile ground for a flood of alternative theories. Conspiracy theories involving planned abduction, human trafficking, accidental kidnapping, and even covered-up domestic accidents circulated widely online. Entire online true crime communities began obsessively debating every detail of the timeline surrounding Kyron's disappearance. The speculations practically became a subgenre within American true crime culture. But at the center of it all remained the same void of concrete answers. Some of these theories questioned early failures by the school, such as its lax control over visitors entering and leaving the building. That day, the science fair allowed dozens of adults to walk freely throughout the school without formal registration. Could a stranger have exploited the chaos to abduct Kyron, or had someone familiar to the child orchestrated his disappearance, taking advantage of the vulnerability of the event? None of these hypotheses could ever be confirmed. The central theory that always loomed, however, continued to focus on Terry Horman. Even years later, many still viewed her as the key piece of the puzzle. Her refusal to fully cooperate with authorities and the inconsistencies in her statements fueled that suspicion for years. Yet her silence was never broken, not by confession, nor by forensic evidence. The case remained a legal and psychological enigma. The American justice system found itself powerless. Without material evidence, no jury could convict Terry Horman or any other suspect. The case became a brutal example of how strong suspicion often falls short of securing a formal conviction. Legal experts widely debated the limits of criminal investigation when faced with the complete absence of physical proof. The Kyron Horman case became an academic reference as a perfect mystery within modern criminal justice, and it remained unsolved. Meanwhile, thousands of families followed Kyron's story with deep personal identification. Parents of missing children saw their own pain reflected in the Horman case. Missing persons advocacy groups kept Kyron's name alive through campaigns and public events. His story came to symbolize the struggle of all families trapped in the agonizing wait for answers. Kyron became a collective symbol of suspended grief. Today, more than a decade after that June 4, 2010, the Kyron Horman case remains officially open. Authorities continue to keep the investigation active, still receiving and reviewing occasional new leads. But time works mercilessly against the hope of ever finding the boy alive. Kyron would be 21 years old today, a young adult if he was still living. His childhood image remains frozen in time, on posters and in the nation's collective memory. Fred, Desiree, and Kaney continue, each in their own way, fighting to keep Kyron's name visible to the public. They participate in missing persons events, give interviews, and pressure lawmakers for stronger legal reforms. Their trauma has united them around a cause that transcends their own personal tragedy. They carry the banner for thousands of other families who live with the same painful silence. Kyron's absence has become their lifelong mission. The case has inspired real changes in school safety protocols across the country. Today, American schools follow stricter visitor control policies and internal monitoring procedures during open events. Kyron has not been forgotten. His absence has led to preventive measures aimed at protecting other children. He has become the symbol of a permanent national warning, a bitter price paid with his own disappearance. In American true crime culture, Kyron Horman remains one of the most painful and haunting unsolved cases in recent history. Books, series, and podcasts continue to revisit the story, keeping the public engaged in search of any new clue. But what keeps the fascination alive is precisely the absolute mystery. A child who vanished from inside his own school, and complete silence ever since. The question, what happened to Kyron, continues to echo across the country, and it will continue until the truth is finally revealed. The story of Kyron Horman is, above all, a portrait of pain that never ends, of endless waiting, of a void that no amount of time can ever fill. And as long as there are children's faces printed on missing child posters across America, Kyron Horman's name will remain among them, because some stories simply cannot be erased by time. Leave your like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next cases.